You know, when you think about it, Pokemon is the only anime franchise that is more successful than Dragon Ball, but then again, this one is a little unfair because Pokemon is always more successful than Star Wars, MCU, and every other media franchise around the world. But having said that, Goku as an icon and Dragon Ball as an anime still dwarf Pokemon's anime adaptations. The impact is no joke. It's so big that Japan straight up declared May 9th as Goku Day in 2015. Why May 9th though? Actually, it's a pun. Go and Ku means 5 and 9 in Japanese. May is the 5th month, and so Goku Day is May 9th. Though of course, this isn't Japan we're talking about. We're talking about the West. Guys, the way Akira Toriyama sensei won the West through Dragon Ball needs to be studied. And that's exactly what we're doing in today's video. Starting from how Toriyama sensei came up with Dragon Ball to how it completely took over the West. We'll be studying it all. But first, let me tell you that it took 7 years after Toriyama sensei published his first work before he started the serialization of Dragon Ball in 1984. He created quite a lot of short stories, and the great majority of them were considered failures. It really wasn't until 1980 that the GOAT found some real everlasting success. That's when he began the serialization of Dr. Slump, a manga whose characters have made several cameos in Dragon Ball as well. The most recent one was Ariel-chan beat Vegeta's ass in Dragon Ball Super filler episode. And that was Dr. Slump's serialization was reaching a boiling point. Toriyama sensei published 2 one-shots in 1983. They were titled Dragon Ball and the Adventures of Tongpu, and yes, both of them were different stories. Dragon Boy follows the story of a young martial artist who has dragon wings on his back. The plot revolves around escorting a princess back to her home country while protecting her from the enemies. It was loosely based on Journey to the West. As for the Adventures of Tongpu, it's about a cyborg boy who comes across a girl named Plamo while exploring the universe. She is the sole survivor of a ship that got hijacked and taken over by an alien. Tongpu helps her in taking the ship back. But while we talking about some one-shots that Toriyama sensei published before Dragon Ball, it's because before we study how Dragon Ball took over the West, we need to understand its origins. These one-shots are important because both of them ended up being prototypes that led to the creation of Dragon Ball in 1984. Of course, in addition to these, Toriyama sensei also took other inspirations such as his love for Jackie Chan's martial arts movies and, more importantly, the classic Journey to the West novel. All those inspirations, all those story elements, his preferences and taste in media, Toriyama sensei combined all of that to realize his magnum opus. Dragon Ball was successful enough to adapt into an anime, but did you know that it actually took a while for the show to find an international success? For example, if we're talking about Dragon Ball anime in America, the first ever dub happened all the way back in 1989. It was done by a production company called Harmony Gold USA, but considering how most modern day Dragon Ball fans must have never even heard of it, you may be assuming that it sucked ass. Well, you're not wrong. They changed everybody's names. Guess what they called Goku in this dub? Zero. Bulma was Lena, Oolong was Mao Mao, Yamcha was Zebikai, Krillin was Bongo. I'd say the only name change that must have made sense at the time was Shenron to Dragon God, because I mean, just look at him. Though the good news is that they gave up after dubbing just 5 episodes and just 2 movies. It was never even broadcasted to the general public because the dub didn't even pass the marketing test. After this, they tried again in 1995, and this time it was a joint production between Funimation and a couple of other big players, but they gave up after 13 episodes. These 13 episodes were then marketed and broadcasted as Dragon Ball: The Saga of Goku. Though it's worth noting that there were still a considerable number of Dragon Ball fans even before it got its proper dub. The manga had already international market though, and I can't personally verify it. There must have been several fan subs for the anime as well. In 1996, Dragon Ball Z started getting dubbed, and although it wasn't a smooth process at all, the Dragon Ball anime made its way to the Anglo audience. Naturally, dubs in Portuguese, French, German, Spanish, and Thai were getting some major traction too. By the end of the 90s, Dragon Ball had already become a global sensation. In the early 2000s, it was dubbed in many other languages such as Arabic. Before you knew it, Dragon Ball was already localized all over the world. From the West to Eastern Europe, the Middle East, and parts of Asia and Africa, kids all over the world started their attempts to become Super Saiyans. But that still doesn't explain how Dragon Ball conquered the West in particular. What we've done so far is just explain the natural course of Dragon Ball's success. Its first success in Japan and then overseas. Now getting into why Dragon Ball resonated with the West so much, we have to note that it appeared at a critical time for the Western audience. All those superhero stories were already done so many times and were honestly rather repetitive, which makes sense because Marvel and DC hadn't really taken off that time either. This is why, right at the time when superhero stories were getting old and boring, Dragon Ball Z appeared. Yes, it's worth adding that it was after the Funimation dub of Dragon Ball Z became successful that they decided to dub the OG Dragon Ball too. As you can guess, Saiyan Saga The Dragon Ball Z was like a whole new flavor of excitement for the Western audience. It felt fresh, violent, over the top, and also caused a suspension of disbelief because apparently the main character is now training meaning in the afterlife. And more than that, the simple aesthetic art style of Dragon Ball stood out in comparison to the other superhero media, which everyone was already used to. But all in all, the most important factor behind Dragon Ball's success is definitely Goku's character itself. He wasn't a hero in the traditional sense. He was just a cool guy who everyone could count on to save the day. The story would get extremely violent, aggressive, only for Goku to pull through out of pure strength of will. Everybody wanted to be like Goku. From the very beginning, Goku was already that guy. Plus, Dragon Ball basically introduced the concept of long-running battle shonen to the West, which is pretty much a staple nowadays. Before, the entertainment media was riddled with standalone episodic stories, but then suddenly, the television had this super bizarre and awesome show where each episode succeeded the previous one and the story only kept getting crazier and crazier. The animation in the fighting sequences was wild, and the music was simply the best. There's no other way to go about it. As long as you like action, you were almost fated to fall in love with Dragon Ball Z. And unlike other shonen like One Piece or Naruto, Dragon Ball had a simple story enough to where you can follow and enjoy it even if you missed an episode or two. You could also rewatch it again and again because it was super awesome to see. Some may attribute Dragon Ball's success to it being broadcasted at the right time in the right place. But let's not forget that Dragon Ball has been a major success regardless of the language or the region in which it was localized. Be it Latin America, the Middle East, Africa, South Asia, China, Dragon Ball topped the rankings because it was simply a phenomenal product. Yes, it is simple, but simplicity isn't a bad thing at all. And of course, it's not easy to write such a simple and easy to follow story either. Dragon Ball doesn't try to convolute either. Even during the Future Trunks saga, it didn't rub all those timelines in our faces. That's why even your dumbass from back when you were 6 years old was able to enjoy the Future Trunks saga just as much as an adult who kept track of the details of the story. What Akira Toriyama sensei did was that he created a story with the universal appeal, the visual style, the fun yet intense storytelling, the charming and badass characters, the absurd world building, and the violence that keeps your eyes on the screen. Even though the first English dub was absolute trash, it was inevitable for it to become successful in North America and beyond. And together with Toonami and Cartoon Network, Dragon Ball Z is what helped in making anime media mainstream. In 1995, Cartoon Network started its anime block with the release of Night of the Vampire Records. Just a few years later, Dragon Ball became the most popular show on Cartoon Network. Hell, it was basically always ranking in top 3 programs on all of television. There was even a time when Toonami's afternoon lineup included both Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z. They also had a Gundam back when they made it even better. Naturally, this made the audience crave more of similar stuff, and well, the big 3, Naruto, Bleach, and One Piece, essentially rode the wave that was created by Dragon Ball. And the rest? As they say, it is history. When you really think about it, the Dragon Ball manga and its adaptations is effectively a masterpiece. It has so much to offer, so much strikingly unique stuff that is also somehow universal, and simple enough for even a literal child to understand. There's the sense of progression because the characters actually age and grow up. And there's also something intrinsically surreal about the characters and the world at large. It's why even when it's been decades since you last watch it, you can easily and immediately recognize it whenever you see it. I love One Piece, but One Piece is the kind of story that sometimes acts as a gatekeeper by overwhelming potential viewers, with its overwhelming large number of episodes and manga characters. But as we just talked about, this is not the case for Dragon Ball. Even right now, you can pull out random Dragon Ball episode and just enjoy it. Dragon Ball is timeless. It has both dinosaurs and time machines. It blends humor with action, which is something every normal person can easily enjoy. Now, before we finish things off, let me emphasize that Dragon Ball basically introduced the West and the world at large to battle shonen genre. It is also what inspired many story elements in other legendary series like One Piece and Naruto. It won the best by starting the era, and the reason it is so loved and appreciated is because people not only love and enjoy it, they also see it as a pioneer of that era. That's right, Dragon Ball is a king and Goku is him. Thank you, Akira Toriyama sensei, and may you rest in peace. Now, I'm sure you guys must have a lot to add on this topic as well, so come on, let's continue the discussion in the comment section down below. As always, a sincere like and subscribe will be much appreciated. Well then, with that said, I'll see you guys on my next video. Peace out, guys.